Welcome to this special edition of Rugby Unfiltered. I'm your host, Jan de Koning, and with me today, a special guest, Dr. Pierre Verveers. Doc, welcome.
Thank you, Jan. It's always nice to be on your program, and I enjoy the talks with you. It huge impact for the listeners outside. So yeah, thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. Doc, we are going to talk concussion, and I know you've got so much background and a lot of stuff about SARU and that, but I think the starting point for me, and I know you can't speak about specific cases, so I'm not going to ask you about specific cases. But we've seen this week, and Rassie spoke, and we'll play Rassie's clip just now, but Rassie spoke about Eben Etzebeth's concussion. And we know that earlier this year, from December till about February, he was out for 3 months with repeated concussion symptoms. And now he's again had a knock in a training session, and now he's got a return of those symptoms, which means he's not going to play for another couple of months. So that's the basis where we come from. So I want to, it's more informative to tell our viewers what it's about. And we know there's a classic case of Pat Lambie who had to retire at age 28 because of concussion, repeated persistent concussion symptoms. So that's where we start. So I think as a starting point, I'm going to play Rassie's clip so the viewers know what's going on, and then I'll hand it over to you so you can chat about it.
Yeah, even we'll give him proper time. He had concussion, and he had a bit of a history on concussion, so I don't think Eben will play in his incoming matches. I think we're all targeting Argentina for that. So it's probably also. Lood might be ready next week. I think he's closer than the others. Ox, Ethan will be ready next week. Ethan Hooker will be available. Ox, Sasha, Krappies, all of them are about 3 weeks before New Zealand.
Doc, I mean, we've listened to Rassie, but I think from your perspective, just please explain to us what exactly is concussion. Everybody talks about concussion, and it's not necessarily that you get knocked out.
Yeah, I think, Jan, that's the starting point is one must understand concussion. So the first and in my opinion, the most important thing is to accept that concussion is a brain injury. Like a tear in a hamstring or a torn ACL ligament. It's a brain injury. So we know that there's damage to the axonal and white matter. We know there's a change in blood flow during a bump against the head. And we know there's a biochemical chaos that happen when this happen when there's energy through the brain. So whether direct, that we must also understand, direct to the head, or a player being tackled, or impact against his torso, and the energy is transferred through to the brain. So that is the first thing we must understand. So saying that is, depending on the energy and the damage that goes through the brain, the result will be neurological change. And that we see, so that's a first and foremost domain that we use to make the diagnosis of concussion. That's the symptoms and signs. Some of these signs we can recognize on the field, and where we have, especially where we're talking about elite rugby today, is where we have video support. There's 2 medical doctors looking at these videos constantly during the match and look for criteria. So we'll come back if there's time in the on-field management. But to go back, there's 5 domains that we need to cover when we want to make the diagnosis of concussion. And as I said, the first one, foremost, symptoms and signs. And that is what we use also in the office when we follow these patients up. The second is balance. There's an array of a whole spectrum of balance tests that we do, and follow that up serially to make a decision of did it return to normal. Then there's the cognitive symptoms that we do, and then there's also the autonomic function that we know that's been altered during a concussion, and then there's the vestibular and ocular motor symptoms, where it's your mid-ear and the balance and how your ear and eye work together to manage your neurological function. So that's the things that we do in office. So that's not just a symptom tick and a tick box that we do, or a simple electronic test. It's a really an in-depth clinical evaluation of a player, and that sets the tone of how the player will be managed accordingly. So yes, there might be no symptoms, but he still might be completely off balance, or completely abnormal autonomic function. So we use this in the whole spectrum, and that's where I want to make the point that someone who treats concussion needs to understand concussion, and needs to understand all these domains and how they interact with each other. That's the set. That's concussion. I don't know if there's any questions at this stage that you want me to highlight,
Yeah,
but
I
that's
think
where we have to.
Yeah, Doc, just before we move on, just quickly, you now speak to what you deal with when the patients are in your surgery, or when you're discussing. Can you explain to the guys, because everybody thinks the player runs off the field and they ask him two questions and then they make a call. I mean, it's a similar scenario that you just described. I mean, it's a very clinical testing. So maybe give us an indication of what type of testing does that player go through when he runs off and he's got that 10 minutes.
Excellent question. So I'm going to stick again with the elite domain, because in amateur and all the other games, there's no head injury assessment protocol. But the games that's been approved by World Rugby, there's a set of standard people around the field that control that head injury assessment. First of all, team physician and the match day doctor. They will identify there's a bump against the head. Usually from the television monitoring, we can see there's a possible injury that might cause concussion. Okay, what happens then? First of all, we see what was the signs that we see. There's two criteria. So the criteria 2 signs is subtle signs of concussion. Then that player will qualify to be assessed in the pavilion, in the medical room, by a concussion expert. That's a set of about 20 steps that go. So we test symptoms and signs, we test balance, we test the cognitive function against his baseline, because all these players do baselines, and it's on an electronic app. So when you do the assessment, and they are very critical about that. So if one of those mistakes happen and is not at baseline, then the player can't return. So when we run through that, we can expect that it's more likely not to be a concussion. Okay, so then the player can go back and play. That's a 10-minute break that we usually see. But that decision to pull the player off is between the matchday doctor, the concussion specialist, and the team doctor. So, but the matchday doctor can overrule. If he suspects, he will overrule the player off. Okay, then we test. Say, for instance, the player has the criteria 1 signs, where we see ataxia. You were quite right. You don't have to be knocked out, but we can see there's a brief loss of consciousness. There's a loss of balance. There's a change in behavior. Then they all qualify as criteria 1 signs. That player cannot be tested and sent back. He's immediately off the field, and he enters a different pathway of head injury assessment. So the player that's been sent back on the field, he will have to repeat the test, a more in-depth test, just after the match, and then after 2 sleeps and serially on, he will be monitored. So then usually, the diagnosis of concussion can be confirmed at that stage, because there was no early symptoms, but we still there's abnormality. Then it's a delayed diagnosis. So we catch that spectrum. And I just want to say here is that this is where the space for using the instrumented mouth guards come in. So we know that we miss with the eye about 12% of concussions, or suspect concussions. And the mouth guard help us to get those out and being tested that we miss with the eye. So that makes the protocol just more significant, you know. So the chances of a guy being bumped against the head and he missed his evaluation becomes very small. So that's on the field. That's the HIA protocol, and that's why I'm glad that you asked it, because some of the commentators also don't understand it. In the Irish match, I would have pulled that player off if I was alongside the field. I don't know if you can remember. I think it was Pendergast, the fly off. I mean, he had a brief sign of ataxia, and no one called him off. So the thing is, it differs, but the protocol also, you will have to have a serial evaluation. I also cleared one of the Springboks after the Barbarians game, where he was pulled off, but it was a no concussion. So the pathway further is World Rugby. All these matches where HIAs and the elite matches, they also fund. I think there's at the moment about 8 or 9 independent concussion consultants that work then with the team physician in that serial evaluation until the player is signed off to return to play. Now, I have no idea what happened with Eben, and as I said, I can't speak to that. But usually, you know, when there's a player at risk, and I want to name the risk factors because I think that's also important for our discussion, is that in that so a player at risk will be monitored not in the World Rugby concussion protocol, but in the head injury health protocol that each and every team has, because these players are exposed to contact all the time. And if there's symptoms, not really a concussion, but we know it's a high-risk player, that team physician will pull the player off and there will be a subsequent treatment. And players that I've treated in my in my career with high-risk profiles, the moment you give enough rest and the moment you reduce the contact to that player, the brain will recover. So before I go to the risk factors, I think another important point to know is the challenge for each physician alongside the field or treating a player with a head injury is to make a proper early diagnosis, and then we can manage the player. So that's the second thing that needs to be in place, and that's one of the areas where I think we still miss, is a dedicated rehabilitation program of all that clinical domains that I've been discussed, is to put that player through a rehabilitation. Through that, I do that with school children that I see in my practice, and club players. So I make use of physiotherapists that know neurological conditions, that are well trained in the vestibular, ocular, and motor dysfunction and rehabilitation of that system. I make use of sport optometrists that work with the eyes together with the physiotherapists if we do the VOMS treatment. I make use of neuropsychologists. I make use of if that needs, if one is worried about underlying psychological conditions. So you can see the team around that. Then in my school children, I work closely with an educational psychologist as well as the school psychologist, to, as we control them back to contact and sort of manage that program gradually. There's also a gradual return to cognitive activity. So all these things, why I mentioned that is that can have an influence in your outcome and your medium and long-term outcome of concussion. So that's all to make sure that when we put the player back to play, the brain has recovered. If you have another concussion, it's a new concussion. So what is then the high risk? So what we look at, what is quite important is if a player have a subsequent concussion within 3 months. If there's 3 or more concussions in the last 12 months, or I would say a season, because the seasons now is not in a year, so
Yeah.
so I look at the season. So then 5 or more concussions in his career. Then also what I reckon in my experience that's a high risk and a red light for me is when your threshold starts to drop. So that means that you need less G's to have the symptoms and signs of concussion and to have a concussion. So sometimes you see on video clips just two players run into a normal, like they play on a rugby field and shoulders bump, and then the player drop and he has a full concussion symptoms and signs. So that's red lights for me, and that's when we start talking about end of career. You refer to Pat Lambie, the constant symptoms and the low threshold. Then also, if there's a previous concussion that's related or not related, but cause underlying and be complicated to underlying psychological conditions. So that's one area that we look at. And then also if there's a previous concussion that takes longer than 21 days. Because if you look at the recovery of a concussion, many of them in 3 to 5 days are asymptomatic, but the brain is still fragile, and the brain is still vulnerable for very low G's to get to make the injury more severe as it is. Then most of the concussions are asymptomatic before 14 days. That's why one of the returns, if we have the criteria twos, is that players can go back within 14 days. So they miss one match, they can play the second match. But if they go through this program, I must emphasize that, with the independent consultants, then very little in the adult players will last longer than 21 days. So that is what happened in that early stages, and then obviously the concussion is being locked on the World Rugby app, and such a player cannot return. So he need to go through the World Rugby protocol, and there's the independent consultants that work with that. So that's more or less. I don't know if there's any questions that you want me to highlight, but it's more or less what happened in that first, time and how we manage a concussion. Again, I want to emphasize it's not just a tick box.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's important. So my question would be this: we speak about the elite players, the guys who are on TV, even at school
Yeah.
level, the first team guys. But perhaps briefly, I know we're limited for time, but perhaps briefly explain to us what is the risk for the guys who play in the fourth and fifth team or the club players that are not on television. How is that managed, and how do you, because you can have the same symptoms, but there's not somebody monitoring those players.
Exactly, and that's a great question, and I think if we have if there's time later, we must tackle the whole school and we've spoken it before, but so the risks are exactly the same. So concussion is a concussion, and it's a concussion for over 2,000 years. Nothing has changed. It's a brain injury, and so nothing has changed. The risks are the same. That's why through the Boxmart and World Rugby, we've built the protocol that players with a suspect concussion, because we know there's not this specialized team, is out for 3 weeks. So we know that within 21 days, 95 or more % of concussions will be recovered. Then, Sport Concussion South Africa, Concussion South Africa, together with Boxmart and SA Rugby, has built our own protocol where there can be an early return to play, but there's a lot of criteria, and I don't want to get into that today, because that's a whole discussion on its own as the elite. But we can go to early return. So we have been more conservative in South Africa. We say 14, not quicker than 14 days. Although with the World Rugby protocol, you can go back in 12 days. But we say 14 days. So we want to miss 2 matches and then start a return to play. So there is a way that we can do a return, but that's a lot of criteria that you have to. So if schools ask me, what do we have to do? I say, well, this is what you have to do if you want to have an early return on a player, and you have to work with a concussion consultant that manage that program. And ideally, we want those players that laid off. It's also actually one of the criteria is to be signed off by one of the concussion experts that's been acknowledged by SA Rugby. So that's not because we only a few at World Rugby, but there's too much players to be managed. So there's a specific educational course, and so there's a list on the Sport Concussion website. Is a concussion website where they can access one of these consultants. And then what I see in my practice is just purely parents, coaches, or physiotherapists that assist these schools teams that will contact me and say, yes, doc, can you see this player for us? We're worried about the player. Now, most of the physiotherapists are well trained to make that early symptoms and signs scoring and alert, say that might be a concussion, let me refer. So that's the protocol that we want from the schools, is refer them into the players. Build your own team around you, but include a concussion specialist to work with these players. But that's from on the non-elite level.
Yeah, Doc, what I want to do is, and you've touched on it now. We need to talk more about schools and the lower league and the non-elite players. And I also want to dig a bit deeper into Box Smart, because we always hear SARU and SA Rugby refer to Box Smart. So I think that needs to be explained to the people as well, exactly what that is. So I want to suggest that next week we have a part 2 of this discussion. So that we also don't stretch it out. I mean, people don't want to sit perhaps for an hour, but it's very important and interesting discussions. So just briefly, in conclusion of this episode, explain to us the dangers of repeated concussions. And you've now spoken about brain injury, but what is the dangers, and perhaps touch briefly on dementia, because I think there's a link, isn't there?
Yeah. So the same risk as for any other brain injuries exists for a concussion. So there can be cognitive damage, there can be a behavioral damage, so there is definitely association, but there's not a direct causal link that could be established. You can imagine the amount of risk factors that can cause. You've mentioned dementia. So that is why World Rugby has instituted, together with South African Rugby, for retired elite players, the Brain Health program, where they can access. It's a free service. They do online questionnaires, and that determine their risk. So the risk factors, and I want to put that out for players to know that concussion is not equal dementia, and repeated concussion do not equal dementia. So if you look at dementia, and it's a complex disease, I don't want to go into that. That's also a talk for a neuropsychiatrist if you want to do it in depth. But that's what all of us are afraid of. So above 65 years, that we start getting confused, we forget things and so on, and we know the association between Alzheimer's and that. So let us look at the risk factors. First of all, we can't choose our parents, so genetics play a role. So if it runs into the family, there's a high risk of. So
Guilty as charged.
Exactly. So that is the one thing. Then your sex. It seems that women have a higher risk for dementia. Your age, 65 years and older. Physical activity. So those people, the couch potatoes, they have a high risk developing dementia. Smoking, certain drugs can reduce your and many of the psycho drugs that we use in psychiatric conditions can also lower your threshold. But then there's other drugs that can actually improve, like the statins. There's good work that shows that statins can improve your function. Alcohol use, Then there's comorbidities, diseases like hypertension, diabetes. Then your body mass, overweight people, has got a higher risk. And then there's also some of the environmental factors. So if you look at this 11 factors, there's about, of them, 8, 9 that is actually modifiable. And that is what this whole program of World Rugby is. It's not to say it's concussion and therefore you're doomed. It's really to look at because all these rugby players
Yeah.
at the age of 40 or 50 and 55 has a combination of these risk factors. And that's why World Rugby took the step, and Dr. Martin Raftery, the previous chief physician, he actually made it his goal is to look further than just manage the concussion, but look into helping these people actually to prevent dementia, and help them understand the modifiable risk factors so that can improve their brain health. So that is dementia, and and we know there's studies that shows that there might be cognitive decline and so forth. But I think that's also, what I've seen, and I had a bit of experience in NFL and recently did a research study with a student of us, a PhD, where we look at energy, different energy tracts or energy sort of pathways in the brain. And it seemed to me that and when we compare a basic rugby clash and a motor vehicle accident clash, we have 2 brain injuries. That the most serious part, or the most serious brain injuries, is with the high Gs. That's when that forces are at high speed and high intensity. We get more damage to that neurons and axons and the interlinking neurons and injuries between the gray and white matter. So that give us more complications, and that's why boxing, for instance, it's a different animal. It's a different type of head injury that we see in boxing, because theoretically, every time a boxer hits the ground after a shot, it's a concussion. So now in 4 or 5 rounds, you can imagine how many concussions. And then if we just take back think of the movie Concussion and the calculation that they made of Baxter, the midback, or the defender of that was the whole CTE, spiked the whole CTE thing, is that he had about thousands of subconcussive hits, and they said nothing. Geez, he just didn't show any symptoms. So and with the helmets and all that, it's a complex situation, and I think we will get, as technology, progress, I think we will get some answers to that. But rugby is still, I think, the safer spectrum, if I can say that.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. So I'm not going to push this too long. I think let's give our undertaking that we are going to record at least a second episode, and we will delve into. So if there are readers that's got specific questions, I'm going to ask them down below. Give us specific questions. And again, I want to reiterate, we can talk in a broader spectrum, but we can't talk to specific cases. So as Doc
Yes.
said, we can't talk about Eben's case. We can't talk about
No.
Pat Lee's case, but we understand the background. So we're explaining to you, like Doc said, what
Yeah.
is concussion, what are the dangers, and we will deal with the non-elite players and perhaps, explain to people what's box smart and what options are there for the non-elite players.
Exactly, because this rugby really is on the forefront in the world, managing head injuries. So not waiting for the problems, but tackling the problem. So that'd be great, and I think the Box Smart program would be great. I think I was quite involved since the development of an early implementation, and Box Smart is a brilliant program, brilliant injury prevention and injury management for referees, for players, and I think parents need also to look into that. Sometimes it's great if parents understand and are also worried. The spectrum that I see is the more worried parents, because that's a complex concussions, that's a different animal. But Yeah, it's a great it's a great topic, and there's lots that we can sort of filter out, and it would be a great idea if some of our
Viewers.
listeners send some questions in.
Fantastic. Doc, thank you very much. We're definitely going to have it, and it's definitely undertaking. We'll once we're off here, we'll offline go and we'll set a date. But from myself, Jan de Koning and Doc Verwees, till next time, and I'm sure it's going to be next week. We'll see now how quickly we can arrange it and what the Doc's times are. He's a very busy man. But till next time, from myself, Jan de Koning, have a lovely rugby weekend and enjoy the Nations Championship.
Thank you, Jan, and all the best for the listeners.